Elena Whitmore never wanted to be Luna. She never wanted the weight of a pack watching her every move, watching her walk, her words, her worth. But the moon had chosen her anyway, binding her to Damien Cross, the alpha of Blackthorn Pack, the night she turned 19. She remembered the way his eyes had found hers across the training yard, the way the bond had settled into her chest, like a second heartbeat. She had hoped, foolishly, that love would follow. It never quite did. Damien was strong and respected, but he was also proud, and pride made him cold. He came from a bloodline that believed strength was proven through bloodlines and battles, not gentleness or loyalty. His mother, Lady Corinne, had never accepted Elena. She whispered constantly that Elena was too soft, too plain, too far beneath the Cross name, and in the shadows of the pack house, another wolf waited patiently for her chance. Serafina, daughter of a neighboring alpha, beautiful and cunning, the woman Corinne had always wanted for her son. Elena tried to ignore the whispers. She tried to be patient, to believe that in time, Damien would choose her fully, not just because the moon demanded it, but because he wanted to. She held on to small moments, a rare smile, a gentle touch, an unexpected kindness, like a lifeline. When she discovered she was pregnant, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. She imagined Damien's face lighting up, imagined the way a child might soften him, might finally make him choose her over his mother's opinions and his own guarded heart. She waited for the right moment to tell him, practicing the words in the mirror, pressing her hand to her still flat stomach, as though the baby could hear her plans. She never got the chance to tell him herself. Before she could speak, before she could even find him alone, Serafina struck. At a gathering of the pack elders, in front of every wolf that mattered, Serafina produced letters, forged, cruel, convincing, claiming Elena had been unfaithful, that the child she carried was not Damien's at all. Corinne's face twisted with satisfaction rather than shock. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by gasps and murmurs. Elena remembered standing there, her whole body trembling, waiting for Damien to defend her, waiting for the bond between them to mean something, waiting for him to look at her the way a mate should look at another, with trust. Instead, he looked at her like a stranger. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low and hard. "No," she whispered. "Damien, please, you know me. You know this isn't true." But doubt had already rooted itself in him, fed by years of his mother's poison and his own fear of being made a fool. That night, in front of the entire pack, Damien Cross stripped Elena of her title, severed her standing, and banished her from Blackthorn lands. He did not ask for proof. He did not ask for patience. He simply turned his back and let her walk into the night alone, carrying his child beneath her heart. Elena walked until her legs gave out, until the pack borders were far behind her, and the cold forest swallowed the sound of her crying. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stay somewhere she was not wanted. She found her way, days later, to the modest home of a distant cousin, Margaret, who lived far from any pack politics, in a quiet human town where wolves rarely tread. Margaret took one look at Elena's hollow eyes and swollen feet and did not ask questions. She simply opened her door and made a bed by the fire. Months passed. Elena's body changed and grew, and so did her resolve. She would not beg Damien for mercy. She would not return to a place that had thrown her away without a second glance. She would build something new, something entirely her own, for herself and for the child she carried. Children, as it turned out, for when her time came, she gave birth not to one baby, but two. A boy first, with a head full of dark hair and a stubborn cry, and moments later, a girl, quiet and watchful, her eyes the same storm gray as her father's. Elena named them Ronan and Ren. She held them both that first night, exhausted and aching, and made a silent promise. They would never know the taste of rejection the way she had. They would never be measured by a pack's cruel standards, and they would never be made to feel small for the actions of people who claimed to love them. She changed her surname to protect them, taking Margaret's family name instead, and slowly, carefully, she built a life. She learned the old healing arts from a retired pack healer who lived nearby. someone who asked no questions and offered only guidance. Elena's hands, once trembling and unsure, grew steady with purpose. Within a few years, she was known throughout the surrounding territories as a gifted healer, someone wolves and even humans sought out when nothing else worked. Ronan and Ren grew quickly, as wolf children often did. They were strong, clever, and fiercely protective of their mother. Elena told them the truth in pieces, as much as young minds could hold. She told them their father was somewhere far away, that he had made a terrible mistake, and that sometimes grown-ups let fear make their choices for them. She never spoke his name with hatred, only with a quiet, guarded sadness that the twins learned not to press. But they were not without questions. As they grew older, Ronan in particular wanted to know more. He would ask why other pups had fathers who taught them to fight, who carried them on their shoulders, who stood beside their mothers at pack gatherings. Elena always answered gently, but her eyes would grow distant, and the twins learned to see the shape of the pain she carried, even if they could not fully understand it. Ren, quieter and more observant than her brother, seemed to understand instinctively that some wounds were not meant to be pressed. She would simply take her mother's hand during those moments and say nothing at all, and somehow, that was enough. Years passed. Elena's small territory grew into a respected community, one that thrived under her quiet leadership, even without a formal pack structure. She had earned trust not through blood or title, but through years of steady, selfless work. The twins, now teenagers, had grown into strong young wolves. Ronan broad-shouldered and quick-tempered, but loyal to a fault. Ren, sharp-minded and calm, often the voice of reason between her brother's impulsiveness and her mother's careful caution. Meanwhile, far away in Blackthorn Pack, the truth had finally come undone. It took years, but truths like the ones Serafina buried rarely stayed hidden forever. A pack elder, troubled by guilt on his deathbed, confessed what he had long suspected, that the letters presented against Elena had been forged, commissioned by Serafina herself with Kareen's quiet blessing. The confession spread through the pack like wildfire. Damien, who had spent years growing colder, more isolated, and more haunted by the empty space where his mate and unborn child should have been, finally learned the truth he should have demanded on the very night he cast Elena away. The realization broke something in him. He had spent years telling himself he had done what pride and honor required. Now he understood, he had simply been a coward, too afraid of humiliation to demand real proof before destroying the one bond that mattered most. He searched for Elena for months, following faded trails and old rumors, but she had hidden herself well. It was not until a regional summit of neighboring territories, a rare gathering meant to discuss trade and border peace, that fate finally placed them in the same room. Elena had been invited as a respected healer and community leader, asked to speak on matters of trade in medicinal herbs between territories. She had no idea Damien would be present, representing Blackthorn Pack as its alpha. When their eyes met across the crowded hall, the years fell away in an instant, replaced by a mixture of shock, old pain, and something neither of them could name. Beside her stood Ronan and Ren, now nearly grown, tall and confident, clearly her children in the way they carried themselves, but unmistakably his, in ways that made Damien's breath catch. Ronan had his jawline and his stubborn brow. Ren had his exact shade of gray eyes, sharp and assessing, missing nothing. Damien approached carefully, as though any sudden movement might shatter the moment entirely. "Elena," he said, his voice raw. "I did not know. I searched for you." "I am so sorry" does not begin to cover what I owe you. Elena stood tall, no longer the trembling girl he had banished all those years ago. "You had years to search your own heart before you searched the forests for me," she said quietly. "But I am not the one you need to apologize to most." She gestured to her children, standing protectively at her sides. Damien turned to them, his composure cracking for the first time in front of witnesses. "Ronan, Ren," he said, testing the names as though they were sacred. "I am your father. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I would like the chance to explain, to make amends, if you would allow it." Ronan's jaw tightened, his eyes hard in a way that mirrored his father's own stubbornness. "You banished our mother while she carried us," he said. "She raised us alone, built a life from nothing, while you sat in comfort deciding you were the wronged one. You do not get to walk in now and claim a title you threw away before we even took our first breath. Ren's voice, when she spoke, was quieter but no less firm. Father is not a title you are owed. It is something you earn, every single day, through actions, not blood. You had that chance once, and you chose fear instead of us. The words struck Damien harder than any physical blow could have. He had imagined this reunion countless times in his mind, imagined forgiveness, imagined open arms. He had not imagined the simple, devastating truth in his children's eyes, that they did not hate him, but they did not need him either. They had grown strong without him, whole without him, and his absence was not a wound they carried, but a fact they had simply learned to live around. He did not argue. He did not demand. Something in him, perhaps the same pride that had once cost him everything, finally bent instead of breaking. I understand, he said softly. I will not ask you to call me anything I have not earned. But if you would allow it, I would like to try. Not as your father by right, but as someone who wishes to know you, in whatever way you will permit. The twins exchanged a glance, some silent understanding passing between them the way only twins could share. Neither offered forgiveness that day. Neither offered a chance at closeness, but neither did they turn away completely. In the months that followed, Damien did not push. He sent no demands, made no attempts to claim rights he had forfeited. Instead, he showed up, quietly and consistently, at the edges of their lives. He supported Elena's standing among the neighboring territories, ensuring her community received fair treatment in matters of trade and border disputes, never asking for credit or recognition. He wrote letters to Ronan and Ren, simple and honest, sharing pieces of himself without expectation of reply. Sometimes they answered. Often they did not. Slowly, painfully, trust began to form. Not the trust of a father and children who had grown up together, but something new. Something built brick by brick from nothing but patience and consistency. Ronan remained guarded longest, his anger taking years to soften into something closer to cautious respect. Ren, ever perceptive, was the first to allow small moments of connection, recognizing in her father's quiet persistence an echo of her own careful nature. Elena watched it all unfold from a careful distance, neither encouraging nor discouraging her children's choices. She had healed in her own way over the years, finding peace not in revenge or bitterness, but in the life she had built despite everything taken from her. She had become someone entirely her own, respected and unbroken, no longer defined by the pack that had once discarded her like something unworthy. She did not need Damien's apologies to feel whole. She had already found wholeness in the sound of her children's laughter, in the community that trusted her, in the quiet strength she had discovered within herself during the loneliest nights of her life. As for Damien, he understood, perhaps for the first time in his life, that some bonds, broken by betrayal, could not simply be mended with an apology, no matter how sincere. Some things had to be earned slowly, patiently, without any guarantee of success. He accepted that reality with a humility his younger self would never have understood. Years later, when Ronan finally called him father for the first time, not out of obligation, but because the word had, at last, come to mean something true, Damien understood it was not an ending, but simply the beginning of what he should have built from the very start. And Elena, watching quietly from where she stood, felt not vindication, but a simple, steady peace. She had lost so much that terrible night years ago, but in the end, what she had built from the wreckage was stronger than anything that had been taken from her. It was, in every way that mattered, entirely her own.